Hi guys, welcome to Discovering MLS. I am here with the man, the myth, the legend, Yank Report, Sam Stokes. How you doing, Sam?
I'm doing all right, man. I'm trying to stay warm right now. It is super cold right now where I'm at in Louisiana. But you know what? We're indoors, so we're doing well. What's going on, man?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got the heating up full blast here. I just looked at my app and it's about 8 degrees over here. So it's that's in centigrade rather than Fahrenheit, obviously. So yeah, pretty chilly here, but not as bad as it has been, to be honest. But good stuff. I mean, let's get right into it. I'm sure people will be familiar with Yank Report. You're a very, very popular channel and podcast. But give us a little bit about your background. How did you get into to the US men's national team? What brought you into it? What was the background into it?
I mean, like everybody else in America, I grew up playing soccer. That's kind of just a rite of passage of being a kid in the United States. But unlike most of them, I just stayed with it, man. I mean, I remember watching Fox Soccer Channel with my dad on the weekends, watching like just the glory years of the Premier League, whenever, Man United was Man United, and you had Sir Alex, and you had Henry, and you had Arsene Wenger over there, and there was just Gerrard was over at Liverpool, and it was just like this wonderful time to watch soccer if you were a kid, man. And you would, it was just a great time to fall in love with the sport. There was so much romanticism involved, and I think as I grew older, things like FIFA kept me really involved with it. FIFA was just such a great game, and I think it was, I think it was the Confederations Cup where I was probably 18 years old. That just really drove home for me that I wanted to follow this squad. I mean, they had players that were more or less my age, like Josie Altidore, Freddie Adu, and Michael Bradley. And Twitter was kind of early on still with Twitter, and I remember Josie Altidore had a Twitter account, so I was following him, and I wanted to get as much of it as I could. I was trying to watch as many of these guys' games as I could, and as that went, I got more and more involved with the message boards and just the little places where you could follow American soccer here and there, and that sort of just grew into an all-consuming passion that eventually manifested into the Yank Report, which is where I'm at right now.
Fantastic, and obviously, you've grown the channel. So it's very, very notable. It's one of the most popular channels up there on the subject. So, how did you get into that? What made you start wanting to sort of do things more publicly and do things on YouTube?
Well, I think I always had just kind of the way my brain works. I always just thought really deeply about this stuff, and I would always try to find ways to have an outlet for talking about that. A lot of times it was message boards or wherever else, US soccer on Reddit. The subreddit was an outlet for a while, but during COVID, I just had a lot more time on my hands, and I do video production for a living. I have a video production studio. So it was this moment in time where I had so much time. I wanted to make videos because I like making videos. I do it for a living. I love soccer, and it just seemed like there was this moment where you had this new enthusiasm for this group of players that we hadn't really seen play together all that much yet. It was just like it was sort of like the Avengers or like Game of Thrones, where there was all these heroes in all these different parts of the world, but we've never seen them come together, and there was just this anticipation for that. So the opportunity to kind of hop on board and evangelize for that and try to, I guess, share my enthusiasm to get more people excited about it is sort of what got me to start the YouTube channel. And I think as I've been putting out videos, kind of the content and what I'm interested in, what I'm interested in sharing has kind of evolved along the way. But I think that was sort of the genesis of everything.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, it really does shine through. I think your Avengers analogy is absolutely perfect because you've come together and you have got these players from very disparate backgrounds playing for very different teams. You've got players playing in England, in Italy, for Juve, across the MLS, all over the place, and they've come together to be this brilliant American team. And we will come back into the American team in a moment, but I wanted to drop in. Obviously, you mentioned what you do for a living is obviously making videos, and I saw on one of the comments on one of your videos earlier on was a chap coming in saying you only had a passing interest in soccer, but the production on your videos was so good he subscribed anyway. I love that.
Yeah, that's kind of cool, man. If it's something people are cool watching and it sounds good, you know, and I can produce the videos in a way that they're easy to follow, even if you don't necessarily know all the characters or familiar with the sport. You know, I mean, that's a win-win for everybody, right?
Absolutely, especially if someone like me who is very much still learning and still taking on all the information. It's not inaccessible for somebody who doesn't have a knowledge of the sport. You present it in a really, really good way, which isn't too basic, obviously. But
well, I'm still learning too. I mean, that's the thing. I hope that what comes through in the show is that I'm definitely not one who like sits on a perch and kind of talks down about soccer to everybody else. I'm absolutely a student, and I just love learning about this sport. I love kind of peeling back the back panel and kind of fiddling around inside at all the bits and kind of sharing what I find. So hopefully whenever people watch the channel, what they're doing is kind of learning along with me. And I always think about the videos as like book reports, you know? It's like I read this, I looked at this, and I'm kind of sharing this information with you because I think it's different than what a lot of people already assume about the sport, you know? So that's sort of the way that I approach it.
Yeah, fantastic. That really, really does come across. It comes across as a peer or a friend saying, "Hey, this is really interesting," you know, and then putting it out there to you. So it really is on a really nice level. I think that's what I'm trying to do with this channel as well. So it's great to see someone like you doing it so well, so I can try and emulate that. So, with the thoughts on the obviously on the most recent World Cup, which you know we all followed very, very closely. I did some updates on my channel during the matches, and I think the world was thoroughly impressed with the US men's national team coming into this. I think it shocks a lot of people who don't necessarily follow some of the main players, you know, who were part of that team. But what were your thoughts going into it? Did you have a lot of optimism going into it?
I mean, I had a lot of optimism that was then met with this intense amount of pessimism that occurred after the September window. I mean, you know, that Avengers analogy works so well because throughout World Cup qualifying, there were so seldom times where all the pieces came together, right? I mean, there was. I think that the World Cup itself was the only time that we really saw like everybody together, and even such, like we didn't really get much Reina, so that's still like another thing that we still kind of wish we could have got, but we didn't. So there was like bits and pieces and kind of moments and games here or there where you could see that when all these characters get together on the field, they can produce something special. You know, they can play. Like we saw them play with Morocco, we saw them play with Mexico, we saw them play with Uruguay. Like they can do it, you know? And at that point, it was really hoping that the gods of soccer smiled upon us, that we didn't get something that happens like with Germany or like with Italy in World Cup qualifying, which we know can happen. We know that can happen. We know like Germany, I think they led the group stage in XG, so they created more goal scoring opportunities than anybody else in the group stage, and yet they weren't able to score, which is soccer. That happens, man. That happens.
Absolutely.
Week in and week out. This is 3 games. There's always 3 game stretches where just crazy stuff happens. You just hope that didn't happen to this team. You hoped that that it would be fair results, you know. And then once you got to the next round, you hoped it wouldn't be fair results. You hoped that something might bounce our way, that you know, that the soccer gods would not smile upon the opposition, that they would miss a bunch of chances, that we would get some fluky goals, goalkeeper performance. We get some fluky goals, whatever. We did get a fluky goal, but the Netherlands was just way too clinical, and I think that, you know, for me at least, it felt like we got beat by a better team, that they just outclassed us. So I came away with it just really pleased by what I saw. Like you said, I think we showed some just really real quality soccer.
Oh,
yeah. We showed the world that the players being produced in the United States right now are just a different class than they were 10 years ago. And if this group, if this, I guess we'll call them class of players, is any indication of what's coming in the future, well, the United States might quickly become one of the big players on the world stage. And I think that was what was set up in this tournament. I think that's perfect leading into 2026.
Yes.
And I think it got me really excited. I had a lot of friends reach out that were like, you know, I've never been into soccer, but this World Cup is awesome, because the World Cup was awesome, man. Whether you follow the U.S. or not, It was phenomenal. How is that going to translate? I had one guy reach out to me that was like, do you have any books you can recommend or something like that? Because I'm falling in love with the sport. I want to keep it going. And I'm hoping that they either, start following MLS or the Premier League or, whatever outlet they want to find to follow the sport, but just get more people in this country excited about it. And I think it was a success in all those different avenues. So I was very happy with it.
Yeah, and rightly so. I mean, I had the USA as very much as a second team for obvious reasons, and was telling everybody around me who would listen who the players were and the ones I knew from MLS and all this sort of the stuff that I'd learned. And I would say the vast majority of that team will be there again in 4 years' time, and we'll be doing a home World Cup to most of the extent. As a unit who's been together and grown together, and it's going to be a real force. I think that's going to be a really, really exciting time. We'll come to that in a little bit more detail in a bit, but. As I said, I agree with your assessment on the Netherlands game as well. They're a vastly experienced side. Lots of international players who've gone to the ends of finals, but the US still showed a lot of quality in that game as well. I think it was really, really, a very, very high standard individually and as a team as well. They're really working well together. But do you think? I don't know. It's the eternal question, and you've got a video on something similar to this. But do you think Greg Burkhead will get another World Cup?
It doesn't look like it, man. It doesn't look like it right now. I was curious just kind of about all sides of the equation, like whether, especially like, does Greg even want to have another World Cup run? And it seems to me at this point that he doesn't. Like, it's especially considering everything that has happened since, in the infamous conference that he had about leadership, where he kind of slipped the Gio Reyna news. That to me sounds like a guy that is reflecting on a period of his life, and as he moves on towards something else. So it seems to me that he's ready to move on, and I think that that's probably the best thing involved for all parties. It would be a really weird thing, I think, considering the age of all the players involved, where some of these guys are, I mean, the vast majority of the team are like college age guys. To go from 20 years old or 24 years old to from 20 to 24, from your early 20s to your mid 20s, or from your mid 20s to your late 20s, where you're becoming an adult, really. You're starting to have families, you're starting to have responsibilities. Who you are and how you see the world changes dramatically. And I think to have like the same figure as your figurehead, as your coach, as the authority figure in the group, it just feels weird to me. Like, it feels like we just need to have somebody else. That there needs to be a different dynamic and a different energy in the group. So to me, I don't think that he's coming back, but we haven't gotten a lot of news on that subject, so we'll see.
What are your views on? I mean, I know this is a debate that happens a lot in England, but what do you think about having a non-American manager as head of the US men's national team?
I think it would appease a huge section of the fan base. I think there's a lot of fans out there who just really possess this insecurity about whether Americans can compete in soccer with traditional countries. And, it's people just in soccer, whenever they hear that Hispanic accent or they hear that English or European accent, it just carries with it so much authority. And there's people that just feel like if it's coming from that voice, then it means something different than if it's coming from an American voice, particularly an American voice with like an MLS background, coming from that world. I've been like really studying just like the impact of coaches and what does it really mean to be a great coach? What separates the great coaches from the other coaches? And I've really come with a real appreciation for the PR side of things, which is something that nobody likes to talk about. Everybody likes to say that, the great coaches are the ones that have, they're the geniuses, they're the ones that see the game differently, they have the great tactics, whatever. The reality is there's not that many different tactics out there. There's not that much evidence that shows that one coach is superior to the other coach. Like, whenever you really plot it out over the long term, and there's people that have studied these things where they look at a manager and how they did at one team and then the next team, and it's really hard to see where one manager is like superior to another manager or one manager is inferior to another manager. There are a few outliers here or there, especially when there's like a moment in time where the game is shifting and there's like a knowledge set that allows you to be better than everybody else. I think like the classic example is when Arsene Wenger came to the Premier League and he had a knowledge of the French league that set him apart from everybody else. And there was a period where he was just able to get these great French players for a lot cheaper than everybody else, which made Arsenal able to compete at a different level, at a different payroll than everybody else. I think of like Pep Guardiola, maybe with Tiki Taka might be a representation of this. Although to be fair, Pep went from the greatest midfield and the greatest player of all time at Barcelona to the greatest German generation maybe ever over at Bayern Munich. And Bayern Munich was the highest paid team in the world at one point. And then he moves over to Man City where they have just unlimited money. So he's kind of jumped from like great to great. But I think Jurgen Klopp is another one where gegenpressing kind of changed the game. And he sort of brought gegenpressing to the Premier League. And I think that kind of high energy and what he saw kind of changed things a little bit. So there are moments in time where you have these great managers that come in that are kind of zigging while everybody else is zagging. But for the most part, you can more or less interchange these guys, which is what we see. I mean, managers get fired on Monday. There's a new manager on Tuesday, and the team is more or less the same. You know, we don't see these like dramatic changes in league position for a lot of these players. If a team is drifting towards the relegation zone and they fire their manager, it's rare that all of a sudden they're going to be at the top of the table in a few, like, you know, it doesn't really happen like that. But there are things that I think are important for the manager. And I think the main thing right now is the PR side of things. How do you make the fans feel? And how do you make the locker room feel is important as well. But I think internal and external are different things. Can you convince the fan base that you're on the right track? Can you be that figurehead? And with a national team, it's not just for the team, it is for international soccer in your country. So for the United States, it is how do you sell the U.S. men's national team? How do you sell the brand of soccer you're playing? How do you do that PR side of things? And I think if we look at Greg Berhalter, I think by all accounts, he was phenomenal with the players. They all seemed to love him. He was, this Gio Reyna situation aside, and even that situation, it seems like the majority of the players were more or less happy with how it went down. If you look at like the Weston McKennie situation was another one which kind of came and went. There were a few big characters that kind of came and went out of the locker room where we didn't hear much about it. I mean, John Brooks' situation happened. We haven't heard anything from the players. Michael Bradley was the captain. He was moved on from. Josie Altidore was moved on from. These are big characters in the locker room that it seemed like the unit was a unit, and they didn't say anything out. They kept it together. Those were big situations, and he seemed to handle it well internally. However, the PR side, selling it to the fan base, that was just never his strong suit. He was never, ever good at that. And I think that's what one of the main contributors, along with his Americanness and his MLS background, really contributed to just the fans just completely dismissing him and completely hating him by the end of the situation. I think if you have someone that comes in with a European accent that is able to speak and sell the team and at least make the fans think that he knows what he's doing, regardless of whether he actually does in the locker room or not. I think a lot of fans would be happy with that, man. You know, you look at like the last two managers, or I guess the last two full-time, I don't know, Jurgen Klinsmann versus Greg Berhalter. I mean, you have these two like completely different people. Whereas Jurgen Klinsmann was the PR guy. He came on TV. He said the right things. People still talk about the things that he said and how those have impacted the future of U.S. soccer. Whenever it comes to the locker room, when he was let go, of course, the article was released talking about all the cliques in the locker room and how everything fell apart and the way that he handled things just contributed to the animosity within the group. He's renowned for just being terrible with tactics. I mean, there's the Philip Lahm biography talking about his tactics, and there's the rumors that Jermaine Jones and Michael Bradley would before the beginning of the game, they'd have a huddle and kind of figure out the tactics on the field. So you have a guy that was great with the PR, terrible with the tactics. And then you have a guy like Greg Berhalter, who seemingly was great with the tactics and managing the team and keeping everybody together, terrible with the PR. And you see how like the fan base has kind of interpreted those two styles of manager. You know, if you could have them both together, that would be a wonderful thing. I think that limits Greg Berhalter's future, I think, in a big way. Like, I don't see, there's no chance he's going to be like a Champions League manager. He's not going to be able to be manager of like Chelsea or some team like that. You know, he's not going to be able to handle the PR. There's just no way. So those are the things that I'm thinking about as far as who the next manager of the national team are going to be.
That's really, really interesting, because there's a lot of similarities there between that and the England situation, where we've gone through a lot of different styles of manager. Through the years, we had Fabio Capello, who was sort of very technically very, very good sort of technician.
Had everybody in the suits. I mean,
exactly,
the team was
and it's
good.
The mindset. And I think Southgate, he's nailed it. He worked with this team when they were very young, when they were in the under-21 team. And he's not the greatest tactician manager on the world. He's on his club record is not good, but he's worked with those players. They trust him. He's set a good psychology in the dressing room. Everyone knows where they are. Everyone's singing from the same hymn sheet, and I think that's what's working for England at the moment. For the US team, obviously you need somebody, like you say, who's good with the PR and selling it to a national stage. So you might want someone quite iconic, like Klinsmann was, or like an Arsene Wenger kind of figure. But do you think it would be better to have someone who connected with the players on a personal level, or someone who was much more sort of hands off but was a good tactician?
I mean, I don't know, man. I think I don't think that we're going to need as much connecting with the players in this next go around, because theoretically the group is going to be older. I think Greg was great with this young group of players to kind of get them all excited and get them on the same page. And whenever you listen to Yunus Musa and Serginho Dest and these guys at Ricardo Pepi, who decided to play for the U.S. over these other nations that they could have played for, whenever they reflect on what sold them, it was Greg talking about the program and talking about the group and what they were trying to do. And he was able to sell that. I don't know that that's necessarily going to be a thing that's needed in the next go around whenever you have veteran guys like Tyler Adams and Christian Pulisic and Weston McKennie, who are going to be in their late 20s and are going to be probably grizzled veterans that have been playing high-level professional soccer for a very long time. It's going to be a very different dynamic. So I don't know if that's necessarily going to be the case. Maybe you do lean more PR, considering when Jurgen Klinsmann came in, you had an older Landon Donovan, an older Clint Dempsey, an older Michael Bradley, all these guys that were adults at that point. Maybe that's where you lean for this next go around as a coach. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's really, really interesting. I think if you've got the quality of players that the US have now, and who are obviously going to be even better in 4 years' time, presumably, and some new crop that will be coming through as well. But yeah, like you said, like you've already mentioned, I don't think you'd need that relationship work. I think you just need to put them in the right formation and tell them to go, play to your strengths, and just let them go.
Yeah, exactly. They already have the relationships. They've already been through the fires. They've already been through World Cup qualifying. I mean, think back to 2 years ago. These guys started World Cup qualifying with like 1 or 2 players that had ever played in a World Cup qualifying game. They just had no idea. And now all of a sudden you've got this whole group of guys that should be around in 3.5 years that have all this experience.
So what do you think? I mean, in my opinion, I think that reading between the lines, we may be on the same page, that this was one of the best US teams ever to grace a tournament, I think. Do you think that the increasing strength of the MLS has helped that domestic team grow, or has it been maybe the players getting experience overseas and coming from different places? What do you think's fed into that?
I don't know how you parse those two things out. I mean, I think that the rising tide of MLS has contributed to just about every player on the roster. I mean, if you look back on what these guys, where these guys have come from outside of the dual internationals, I mean, all these guys developed in U.S. soccer academies for the most part. A lot of them developed in MLS academies. A few of them had tastes of MLS before they moved on to Europe. So I absolutely, man, and I think it's only getting better. I mean, I watched a little bit of the MLS Next tournament a few months ago, and just the quality of soccer those guys are playing is crazy. I mean, I saw a game. I think I might have messed this up, but I think it was San Jose Earthquakes youth squad against the River Plate youth squad, and this was like U16 or something like that. And wow. River Plate is one of these giants from South America. They're this massive team in Argentina, and the way that development works in most leagues around the world is that you have one or two giants in your league, you know, representing the large population areas in your countries that everybody kind of flocks to. If you show some promise at a young age, you're going to end up in these academies. In England, it's generally the Arsenal Academy, right? If you're a young player in England and you're showing some promise, somehow, some way, get your butt to North London and go to the Arsenal Academy. You know, if you grow up in the Netherlands, it's going to be Ajax. You know, if you grow up in Austria, it's going to be Salzburg. You know, wherever you grow up, there's going to be some satellite club that it is the club where all the youth players go through. So River Plate is one of those clubs in Argentina. In the U.S., we don't have that, right? In the U.S., right now, we actually, I'm pretty sure we still do have these territorial things for MLS where if you're born in a certain area or you grow up in a certain area, you have to go to that particular club. I know they're kind of loosening those rules right now.
I didn't know that.
So what ends up happening is like, you've got not all MLS clubs are super care about their academy systems, but a lot of them are putting more into it right now. But I'm watching the San Jose Earthquakes like go toe to toe with River Plate, and I think they ended up losing the game. But it's still just like River Plate is one of two clubs in Argentina that are worth a damn. And I mean, I'm being a little bit dismissive.
I know what you mean.
They're one of the two clubs, right?
Yeah.
Where if you're a youth player in Argentina, you're going to go there. San Jose Earthquakes is like one of three clubs in California that represent like this small little area of California, and they're going toe to toe with these guys. Like that's mind blowing to me because it's just different how it's laid out. I mean, we've seen the success of FC Dallas and Philadelphia Union more recently, but there's just so many more clubs in the league. I mean, you consider like Austin FC has only been a club for a few years, so it's not like you can really expect them to be pumping out talent out of their development academies. But if you fast forward 4, 5, 6, 10 years down the road, as there's 30 clubs in this league and maybe even more, just the amount of people that you have now that aren't slipping through the cracks that may have otherwise, and then even below MLS, not just below MLS, but MLS has a large web of academies outside of their academy, so that you have your hub. Like I know in my world in Louisiana, we have Houston Dynamo affiliate academies that you can go to. And if you show out for them, then you get invited to the next tier and you can find your way to professional soccer that way. We haven't seen it happen yet. I don't know, but at least the option is there, which it's never been before. And then you get to your next tier with your USLs and kind of everything else that's in the soccer world. So just the quality of coaching that's there, the quality of competition, the organization, and the ability to bring these guys together so that they're playing with the best competition available, and they're playing in these tournaments against very good competition. They're bringing in clubs like River Plate to give these kids tastes of international soccer. I think it's all those things that are contributing to what we see with the players being developed right now in U.S. soccer. I don't think that you can possibly take that away. Now, to be fair, if you look at the top echelon of players, the best of the best that we're producing, a lot of these guys have had very, very, very unique childhoods and unique backgrounds. Christian Pulisic and Gio Reyna, probably the two best players we've ever produced, both come from soccer families, first of all.
Reyna's especially impressive, isn't he?
Yeah, they both have European passports. So it's just kind of crazy how similar these guys are.
Yeah.
Tim Weah is the exact same. Tim Weah comes from a soccer family. He's got the passport. He can go to Europe. He was able to do it at a young age. Weston McKennie's dad was in the military. He was able to spend time in England. Tyler Adams is a bit unusual of the group. But whenever you kind of look at these guys and see the ones that have reached the pinnacle of the mountain, the highest mountaintops, you see kind of these similarities. And you hope that as it grows, you start seeing more guys, maybe like Brendan Aronson, maybe like Tyler Adams, guys who don't have the European passport, didn't come from the extreme soccer families with the histories of Gio Reyna and Christian Pulisic and Tim Weah. Can we start converting some of these guys into top echelon players? And I think once that happens, that's really whenever the floodgates start opening for American soccer.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it shows someone like Aronson, like you said, doesn't come from a soccer pedigree, but obviously he's gone on to play in the Premier League, and his brothers just moved to the Bundesliga. He's been playing for Eintracht Frankfurt, so a huge legacy there, which is absolutely fantastic. And as you say, Tyler Adams, he's my guy. He's the shirt I've got right now. It's got to be him. I think he is absolutely amazing. He's got a huge future ahead of him. If he captains that side of 2026, then the world is their oyster. I think that's so exciting. But from your point of view, on an MLS point of view, do you have a team? Do you have a local local team that you support in the MLS, or is there another team?
I have been growing more and more towards Austin FC. Since they started. I mean, I have friends in Austin. I visit there frequently. I really enjoy it. I went to one of the games, and it was absolutely phenomenal. It was one of their best games of the season. Actually, it was like they had a 3-goal deficit that they came back from, and it was absolutely insane. And I sat in the fan section, and it was just electric. I did go to a Houston Dynamo game, and they gave me a jersey. I went with Filippo, tactical manager, and they gave us both jerseys and gave us a tour. So that was kind of cool. Got to be partial to them.
Yeah,
but they need to play better, flat out, in order to keep me interested week in, week out. Austin's been a lot of fun, but for the most part, I always just support players, man, and I support storylines. And I want to see. I want to see certain guys and see what they do, man. I'm really interested to see TFC this season. They've spent so much money. I'm going to put a video out soon talking about kind of the finances in MLS and how much big the league is. So much bigger and so much more financially powerful than I don't think anybody realizes. Like, there's a lot of discussion about comparing MLS to leagues in Europe, and a lot of times just the sheer financial power of MLS is unbelievable. Not so much at the ceiling. The teams don't have the ceiling, but the floor is so much higher.
Oh, huge. Absolutely.
It's crazy. It's not even a comparison. You see so much of a difference between the top teams and the bottom teams in Europe. In MLS, there's not really a difference. So like 1 through 30, you're getting some pretty high level soccer. But TFC spends, I think, more or less double what anybody else in the league spends. Like, they're spending $36 million on payroll next year, which is that would put them like, gosh, I can't remember, like maybe 16, 17 in the Premier League, more or less.
Yeah, around that. Yeah, I watched your video on that today, actually. It would be around that sort of level, Yeah. So their financial power is insane. So what's going to happen with these guys? Are they going to be able to put it together and really go on a run? And what will that inspire some of these other teams to likewise spend a whole lot more? And really, how does the World Cup and how does the World Cup momentum affect MLS this year? Are we going to see more people at the party? But I think the bigger story is the Apple TV deal. How does that affect things? Huge.
How what are we going to get from that? So that's going to be some really interesting storylines heading into MLS this year.
Massively. I think it feels like the league is moving 100 miles an hour with the players that it's bringing in. As you say, the money that is being spent there as well, on best part 30 teams that is in there, and it's all going on. They're all moving forward at a real pace. Even the new, the new St. Louis team, you can see are bringing on board really good players. They're not going to be bit part players. They're already going to hit the ground running, and that is a brand new team. You think this is absolutely phenomenal. and it's got to produce superstars. And like I said, with the amount of youth development, all the academies that are coming through, which have effectively made Super Draft a second thought for getting new young players. It's absolutely phenomenal. It's so impressive. I think it's going to lead into. I think the league's just going to get better and better and better. There's no turning back.
The stadium is beautiful in St. Louis, man, and that's an area where I think there was 2 players on the World Cup squad that are from that area. I know Josh Sargent is one. I can't remember the other one. There was no, he wasn't on the World Cup squad. I thought it was. No, never mind. I'm not gonna say it because I'm gonna be wrong. Anyway, yeah,
you'll know better than me.
Just like having, whenever you look at the map of the United States and where the MLS clubs are laid out, and you just see kind of the gaps, the population gaps being filled in, and you see kind of these geographical rivalries coming together. It's so cool, man. It's so cool. Just considering. Maybe a few years ago, like if you were Houston Dynamo and FC Dallas, like your closest rival might be, Atlanta United for a while there, maybe before that, like it was even further away. And now, you got 3 teams in Texas, and then you got this team in St. Louis, and they're kind of filling in the South, really, with like Nashville is in there, and Atlanta is in there. It's just. It's a really cool thing to see it all come together, and just, as a national team fan, you're excited to see how is this going to impact the quality of player being produced, and how is it going to affect the national team later on. But yeah, like I'm going to put this video together. It's one that I've been thinking about. I've just been so damn busy at work lately. I can't get it done. I got a bunch of video ideas that I'm really itching to get out there. I got a bunch of tabs open on my computer right now with research, but I think people have no idea how high the floor is in MLS for these clubs. I see all the time people discuss like comparing quality of league to quality of league. I don't think people realize how, like, people talk about the Scottish Premier League all the time with Celtic and Rangers. Yeah, like Celtic and Rangers would represent like the 4th or 5th highest payroll in MLS, and then once you move on for the rest of the Scottish Premier League, I think the majority of them spend less than every other MLS club. Whenever you look at the Dutch league, you hear that comparison all the time. You have like Ajax and PSV. Like Ajax would be, I think Ajax would be a super club in MLS. PSV is only around 20 million roughly, so they would be behind TFC. But then the rest of the league, you fall off super quickly to having less payroll than MLS. And as you go on and compare them to other leagues, Liga MX can't financially keep up once you get past the top 4 teams. Brazil has, they have like 8, 9. They go pretty. They're pretty stacked at the top, but they fall off as well. Even whenever you look at like Serie A and the Spanish La Liga, like the drop off from these leagues is significant. And whenever you compare the bottom teams in a lot of these, even top 5 league teams to MLS, you start seeing just like the power that the league has at the bottom of the table. And like you realize just the quality of player and the quality of soccer you're able to see week in, week out in MLS, even if you're not following one of the top teams. It's pretty significant. So it's interesting to see how that's going to play out in the future, man. It's really exciting. It's a whole different way to view international soccer. Not saying that it's better or it's worse. It's just different. And it's fascinating to see how it's all playing out.
But I think that is one of the allures of MLS as well. I think it really does bring people in because you haven't got a top 2, 5, it's Big 6, whatever it is. Anyone can be in the playoffs. If you start the season, you've got a good chance of being in the playoffs because, like you say, the floor is high. The ceiling, who knows where it is, but the floor is high, and there isn't. It's completely flat. There's been, I don't know, the last sort of 12, 13 seasons, like 10 different winners. It's so much more competitive than pretty much any league, and that's one of the things that I think makes it so fascinating to follow. See, week to week to week, you're always, you're following different teams, and yes, some are going to be very, very strong. LAFC, clearly, have a great seasons, and they probably will again. But even if you come 6th, you don't win a lot of your matches, you've still got a chance there, which I think is absolutely fantastic.
It's fascinating. You look at the payrolls of like a league like La Liga, which is just so damn top heavy. Barcelona and Real Madrid are going to have like 10 players each that are making more than half the teams in the league spend on payroll yearly. Like, it is so unfair. It is more or less. I mean, it would be like an MLS side playing against a USL2 side.
Yeah,
that's like their league games. You know, like that's kind of the difference in competition whenever you consider how much they're actually spending on players, and the level of quality that they're able to bring, which really makes you think about, you know, like, everybody watches Messi highlights and stuff, but you think about like some of these nameless, faceless teams in La Liga that just serve as backdrops for Messi highlight videos. See how they run through these teams. You don't get that in MLS. You know, there's games where it's lopsided, but it's difficult to do week in, week out, and it's interesting how it's impacting the statistical world. I remember reading an article on XG, which is the big statistic that everybody's afraid of in the soccer world.
Yes.
Part of what makes XG work is the disparity of quality in leagues. It allows it to the data to fall on this nice little circular line. It allows the distribution to work. The XG in MLS does not track as well as it does in any of the other leagues. The distribution model's all messed up. And a lot of people believe it is because of the salary caps and the restraints put on the lineups and just the quality that you face week in, week out. It throws off the statistics that we know about soccer, which is crazy. And it produces results that you don't see in any other league, like Philadelphia Union, which is among the least spending teams in the league, being able to get in the finals and put on a show against LAFC, which is not as much as you think, but one of the top spending teams in the league.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely brilliant. It's case in point that someone like Hani Mukhtar was top scorer in the league, but not the best player in the league, not playing for the best club in the league, and it's not something that would happen in one of the other big leagues. No,
it forces all these interesting dynamics to come into play that aren't really coming into play in the big leagues in Europe, which is like the stuff that we see in a lot of other American sports, which is quality of general manager, you know, quality of signings. Who are you signing? Who are you scouting? You can't do what a lot of the European teams do, which is sign this big player. They don't do very well. Well, screw it. Let's just sign another big player. We can do that financially. We can see it. You look at a team like FC Dallas that signed, I can't remember the striker's name. I had it and I lost it. Their designated player striker, who is now the backup striker because he's just been awful. He's the highest paid player on their team. He's makes like $2 million a year. And they're just stuck with his contract. They can't move off of it. And of course, in MLS, you only get a certain amount of DPs, right? So the quality of your front office and the ability to sign these players is so much more important. Like you have to be able to replace this talent. The academy system is so much more important because if you can get guys to contribute who are on a very small salary, it opens up so much more room. So coaching, tactics, front office, all these things are so much more important in this league than they are maybe elsewhere, because elsewhere, if Bayern Munich is having an off year, if they sign a player that doesn't necessarily work and they have a coach that's not that great and you know their tactics kind of suck, it doesn't really matter. Like they're still I think Borussia Dortmund spends about $90 million a year, and Bayern Munich something like 250. You know, like they're spending so much more than everybody else that it just doesn't matter. It does. All those other things don't matter. In MLS, they actually do matter, which is I don't know if it's better, I don't know if it's worse, but it's just different, and it makes it fascinating, and it's just cool to watch, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, the disparity in other leagues, it isn't fair. And like I say, if you are one of the smaller teams, you happen to put up a real gem out of nowhere, out of a youth team, or you picked up a bargain, it'll just get snatched out of your hands within a year or two anyway. So you just can't win on those fronts.
Yeah, it's one of the videos that I'm working on right now is about promotion relegation and how that affects academy systems and how that affects player development. And in researching that, you see that the teams that are fighting for promotion, they just don't produce players. They're not going to do it. And the reason why is the youth players generally don't even make their first team because they would have been sold a long time ago. I mean, if these players show a little bit of promise at all, they're getting gobbled up the chain. And for the most part, they're not even at these small clubs to begin with. If they're very, very good, if they're a very, very good player at like 16, 17, they're already moved up the chain to the top academies in their league. You see the number one academy in the world, the academy that produces more players than anybody else. You could probably guess it, right? What do you think it is?
At the moment, I would say Ajax.
It is Ajax. Yeah, it is far and away Ajax. And Ajax never has to worry about relegation. That's not a thing. And they spend more than anybody else in their league. They're the top dog. They're in I think they're in the biggest, most populated city in the country. I think I don't know the Netherlands geography all that well, but it makes sense to me. So they're able to gobble up all these youth players and produce like that. That's not really the case in MLS. In MLS, it is important to produce these players. It is important because you get to pay these players less. You get to start them more. A big transfer is more valuable to you because you can reinvest in your youth squad. The down line or the down payroll players in MLS are super important, man. If you're one of the big teams in Europe and you're paying a lot of players that are down payroll, that's not very good. That's a bad situation. Then you're going to end up in a situation like Manchester United or Juventus right now, who are two super clubs who have a lot of players at the top of their payroll list that aren't seeing minutes either because the quality is not where it needs to be, or they're injured. They have long-standing injuries. I mean, Man United was paying Ronaldo $500 million a week, something like that. Or $500,000 a week. Sorry, $500 million. Half $1,000,000 a week.
He's big, but he's not quite that big.
And you had him on your bench, right? Like that's not a good thing at all. Juventus has a number of guys: Di Maria, Paul Pogba. There's a few guys that are just out, and that's why Weston McKennie, who's kind of middle of the table as far as payroll on their team, is contributing and playing, and that's a big reason why Juventus, despite having this big payroll number, despite being this giant, is struggling right now. Like you need those players to play. In MLS, if you have a lot of guys that are kind of down lineup, that are down payroll, that are contributing to your club, a club maybe like Philadelphia Union, then all of a sudden it's a very good thing. Then you can really compete in the league, and you're able to just continue to grow. That money is able to be reinvested in either transfers coming in or your academy system or whatever else. Maybe there's players in your academy system that you do want to pay to keep around for a while. It's an interesting dynamic, the way that it all plays out. So I'm fascinated with it, and I don't know. I'm not a betting man, but it seems like it's working in a big way in order to contribute to the growth of the sport in this country and the quality of the players that are being produced. And I'm also really fascinated about how the success in MLS is kind of emerging in Europe, about how the European executives are kind of taking a look at that and go, how can we incorporate some of these things where we are? And I mean, the Super League made the big headlines, and everybody got mad at that, but you kind of saw the writing on the wall with that. I mean, that's probably going to come back around in one form or fashion somehow. But there's things here or there that kind of crop up that the Europeans are looking at MLS going, there's some things that we can do that we can glean from what these guys are doing that might work over here. Shoot, even Brazil last season in the Brasileiro League was discussing possibly, they more or less wanted to form like what the Premier League did, which is like take the top teams and break away and do the TV broadcast deal, which is different than their tradition, that what they've had for years, for centuries, whatever it is. So but it's all very fascinating to watch how these different dynamics are at play and how what they manifest in the long run.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you should say that. I think that there's 2 points from me on that point. That I think that if it's stuff like the Super League and the unfairness of the league that is making people look away from the Premier League at the moment, and this is one of the reasons why I think MLS is getting more and more popular in this country. But I also think there is a conspiracy theory in this country that so many of our Premier League clubs are owned by Americans or American corporations. We've got Liverpool, Manchester United. My club Leeds is almost majority owned by the 49ers enterprises. That will come in time. Obviously, there's the Arsenal connection. There's so many of those that they reckon that if you've got 14 clubs that vote for something in the Premier League of 20, then it goes through. So there is this conspiracy theory that promotion relegation may be tinkered with over here because of the American influence, sort of saying, we don't want this jeopardy anymore. We want this to be a bit more. So maybe not taken away, because I think that would really make people revolt in this country. I don't think people would stand for it, but maybe change it up a little bit. Maybe have a playoff between the Premier League and the Championship to see who moves up or down, that sort of stuff. I wouldn't necessarily be averse to that, to be honest, but it is definitely the leagues and the sides of the Atlantic learning from each other. I think then there is definitely I think there'd be something to be said for some sort of draft system over here. I think would work really nicely. I think if we had some sort of leveler there, something to make the really big moneyed clubs at the top not so different from the rest of the 14 or 13 that's below. So I certainly would be an advocate of it.
I think there's certainly I think there's cultural differences that contribute to this as well. I think I'm a big fan of British culture and British comedy in particular. I love watching the chat shows. I love Taskmaster and Would I Lie to You. I like the Graham Norton show and just like a lot of British humor and stuff like that. And whenever you learn more about that, and I think this is true of a lot of different European countries, is there's this sense of like classism and a sense of place. And a sense of like you belong where you belong type of thing in that culture that I think contributes greatly to this idea that like Manchester United deserves to be like the best. Or like, whereas in America, like Leicester City would have been like this massive thing. Like over in Britain, it was like everybody was just waiting for him to fail. Like everybody wanted to like
absolutely
see him fail and go, that's where you go back to your place, Whereas in the United States, like everybody feels like they're going to be rich in the next week, everybody feels like they deserve a shot, so there, I feel like there's just that's certainly a cultural thing that is off, and I think that comes through in the fanhood as well. I think there's a lot of Americans who really identify with like the British soccer culture and the British isms. You see a lot of Americans who follow soccer who want to use a lot of British isms and speak that way when talking about the game, which is always funny to me. It's always ridiculous hearing that out of an American voice. But I feel like they often interpret that British culture without sort of that British cynicism that is like so ingrained in that culture. Like to me, whenever I think about the difference between the two cultures, like you'll have a British fan who is mad at their team and they'll go like, these players are shit, the coach is shit, the team is shit, the city's shit, my house is shit, my girlfriend's shit, my life is shit, it's always going to be shit, everything about this is shit. Whereas like an American fan will see that same thing and go, my coach is shit, my team is shit, I'm great though, I'm the best. These things are not good enough for me. These things are not meeting my expectations of who I am, and they need all to change. So you have the Americans kind of reflecting that British cynicism with the, I don't know, American confidence, I don't know, like American self-esteem, and it comes out in this bizarre kind of arrogance, I guess. I don't know how
there's definitely more of a confidence and optimism about the American sort of supportership that I can see. I definitely identify, and I think there is definitely a resonance I think that goes across both, that I will say, oh, my team is awful, this is brilliant, and it's a terrible place, living around here, it's awful, it's terrible, it's a terrible place. If you say it when we've got a problem. It's like, there's a pride to it as well. There's I can say this, you can't say that about my place. That's there is an inherent thing there, but there is also definitely a sense of entitlement for the top teams, which I think a lot of the lesser teams find very objectionable. I think especially, but like you said, I haven't seen it at all with US soccer. Saying that, I mean, you might, I don't know, is it, I'm not by any means an expert, is it something like you might get in baseball with like a Yankees mentality? Is that a similar thing?
I could see that for sure. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, that's a great point. I mean, the Yankees kind of, especially in the 90s and the 2000s, had like this period where they were outspending absolutely everybody, and it got really irritating there for, I think, a lot of baseball fans. I mean, I don't know baseball nearly as well as soccer. It seems like a lot's changed as far as that. It seems like the statistical revolution has really impacted that sport in a major way, just like it's impacting soccer currently.
Absolutely,
but
yeah. Big story that, yeah.
The difference is like the sheer numbers involved. I don't think that the disparity in baseball between, I'll have to look this up because I don't know for sure, but I don't think the disparity in spending in baseball is anything like it is in European soccer because of populations. I mean, you look at a country like England, and there's a few population centers. There's only a few, right? I mean, London, Leeds, Liverpool, maybe a few cities in the north here or there, but like London's the big one, right?
Yeah, oh, big time, massively so, yeah.
In the United States, you have a lot of big cities, right? There's big cities across the country. In every big city across the country, you have big businesses that are able to write big sponsorship checks and contribute a lot of dollars to the point where all these different cities are just able to support these big teams. It's not necessarily the case in European soccer, particularly in some of the smaller countries like the Netherlands or Belgium or something like that. But another big contributor to England in particular, which is really throwing everything off, is the globalization of the game to the point where because the Premier League is now more the League of the World than the League of England at this point, and these teams are more brands than they are football teams at this point or soccer teams at this point. You have money coming in from all over the world to these teams, but where's the money going? You know, how many American fans are like supporting Burnley, you know, or something like that?
Yes,
you know, there's not a lot of guys that are out there rocking like West Ham jerseys and stuff. You know, it's the big six teams, and it's Chelsea, it's Arsenal, it's Manchester United, which is this global expansion has allowed these teams at the top to swell even more, to grow even more, to the point where it's just not even fair at this point that there's like 6 teams in the league that are spending $90 million, and then everybody else is at like, you know, 40, 30, whatever else it is. So it's just, globalization has made it grow even more. And I know that affects things in England with like ticket prices at the games and trying to even get tickets to some of these games, and just a lot of the fan culture, a lot of changing traditions to suit the globalization and the tourism and everything like that. But it is a major factor that is affecting this disparity that exists because of the system that doesn't necessarily exist in the United States. The United States has we have 3 of the biggest leagues in the world, or the 3 biggest leagues in the world, I should say, NBA, MLB, and the NFL. And the NFL is far and away the biggest league in the world. The NFL, I'm quoting figures off the top of my head right now. NFL brings in, let's say, $12 billion in revenue a year, and the EPL brings in like $4 billion in total revenue a year. And while the EPL is the global hub of world soccer, the NFL is a sport that is mostly, let's say 80%, being generous, supported by Americans. So the U.S. doesn't really need that international interest in order to have a globally competitive league. It's not necessary. They have the money in the country, they have the fans in the country, they have the resources, they have the infrastructure, they have the corporate community, they have the millionaires, the billionaires, all that stuff is within the United States. So you don't necessarily see kind of that. I mean, there's some of that with the Yankees, of course. There's going to be maybe some of that with the Lakers or some of the big teams but it's not nearly what you see over in England with the foreign influence on the EPL over there.
Oh yeah. Like you said, it's a global league now. Absolutely. I would really like to see, I've only just sort of thought of this from the back of what you've said, but if we had some sort of Anglo-American where some of our Premier League teams could play some of the MLS teams, I would love to see that. That would be an absolute dream.
Well, I'm fascinated next summer with the League Cup to see how the leagues take that seriously, because you're going to have Liga MX versus MLS, and it's going to be all Liga MX teams versus all MLS teams, which is very important because throughout the annals of history, whenever we compare quality of leagues in soccer, we're comparing the upper echelon teams, the upper tier versus the upper tier of the other leagues. Which, I mean, if you're comparing data sets, generally that's not how you would do it. Generally, you're creating an average of some sort and you're comparing the averages. Usually, whenever you're comparing data sets, that's not how we do it in soccer. So right now we're going to get the in next year we're going to get the League Cup, and we're going to be able to see that Liga MX, while they have some big teams in their top 4 or 5 or 6 teams, whatever it is, once you get past that, the drop off is significant. Whereas MLS doesn't have that significant drop off. So we're going to start seeing situations where, gosh, I can't remember some of the names of the lower tier. Like Tijuana is one of the the lower tier Liga MX teams. Like, is Tijuana going to go to like Houston Dynamo and just get smacked around? You know, are we going to see that? That'll be really interesting. I don't know that's ever really happened before in world soccer. Maybe it has, and I'm just not aware of it. But I'm fascinated by that to see how that plays out.
Absolutely, yeah. We've got to wait 7 months, and it kicks off in July, I think. So
we'll see how they treat it. You know, it might be a situation where the teams are like, whatever, we'll play some academy players, and it's not a big deal to us, and we got bigger fish to fry. But if everybody comes out competitive and puts their best foot forward, it's going to be interesting, and it might change some hearts and minds in this country.
This Champions League spot's up for grabs, so I think it should be taken seriously. I think there's 3 that go in, and the winner goes into the round of 16. So if you can win that, you can seriously catapult into a really high echelon there. I wonder if it's going to be like the Carabao Cup, where people take it seriously way later on. Bit of a joke now, Yeah, well, actually, there was a good match between City and Liverpool. Really had a great match on it last night. So I would say that, but they took it really seriously. But it is a bit more. It's not taken as seriously as the others. You have to if you're those two teams, because anytime they play, they're competing globally for hearts and minds, right? It's different. Exactly. This is it. It's a different ball game now. Yeah. And they've got a full roster of players that are just unbelievable. So it's difficult. Yeah, and they need to use their full squads as well. Yeah, exactly. So just moving on to looking forward to 2026. You've got a World Cup coming around. Obviously, we talked a little bit about it before. We're going to have a US team, which is potentially better than the one we've just seen, because obviously the players will be older. There'll be some young blood in there as well. The fact that it's a domestic tournament and we've got a US team going into it with a real chance of doing very, very well. We've got obviously Canada and Mexico, not forgetting those guys as well. But the effect that will have on the country, I think, that whereas maybe looking back to 94 when the World Cup was last there, it didn't make a huge impression, but it certainly opened a lot of people's eyes in America to soccer as a sport. What sort of effect do you think it will have on the nation? Do you think it will have more of a broad impact because of the broader sort of MLS scene at the moment, and the sort of consciousness is a bit higher on football, or do you think it's going to have a limited impact? I disagree that 94 didn't have a big impact. I mean, 94, maybe I played that down. It did open the door a lot. It was a big. It was massive. It was the history of the sport. Yeah. It was the catalyst for MLS. It was, I mean, really the kickoff of modern soccer in this country that has kind of led us to here. I think I'm already hearing people talk about 2026. I'm already have friends that aren't into soccer that are talking about which games are we going to, which cities are we going to? Are we going to go to Mexico? Are we going to go to Houston? Are we going to go to where do you want to go for these games? So people are excited about it. I mean, people in the United States, I think, love the World Cup. I think that's something that nobody's ever questioned. It's just sustaining that love after the World Cup. So I'm excited about that. I think it's going to be huge. I think it's going to be absolutely huge. I think the bigger question is sustainability and what's going to happen there. Right. And just,
the U.S. didn't make the World Cup in 2018, right? We didn't have a team in the World Cup, and yet the difference between 2014 and 2022 in the growth of soccer in this country was absolutely massive. Even without that World Cup in 2018, the growth just continued year over year. People care more and more about the sport. And MLS, I mean, the growth of MLS, not just like butts in the seats and like the actual growth of the league where there's more players and all that, just like the growth of quality in the teams, just the seriousness that not only I think people in this country take it, but I think the world is just taking it a lot more seriously now.
Yeah.
The quality of players that they're bringing in from Mexico and South America and Colombia and Argentina, and even Europe. Just the competitiveness and quality in MLS just continues to grow year over year. So I'm fascinated with what is MLS going to look like in 3.5 years? Are there going to be?
Yeah, what a question. Yeah.
What are there going to be? Are there going to be more Ricardo Pepis that just kind of take over like the soccer world in this country, or specifically in the Mexican American players? I know that there's a few Mexican American youth players out there right now that everybody's looking at to see what this player is going to be and what they choose to do, and we're still waiting for that great Mexican American player to come in and really change a lot of hearts and minds in this country. But not just that. I mean, there's so many. Who are these players that are going to emerge from this youth system? Are there going to be more Pulisics and more Gio Reynas in the next 3.5 years? And then on the flip side, the dual internationals. Are there going to be more Serginho Dest and Yunus Musas out there that are going to come into this group and really change things?
Yeah,
I'm really excited about all that to see what happens there. It feels like we're at this stage right now where it's really just like hitting a breaking point in this country as far as people caring about the sport. So where will we be as a soccer nation in 3.5 years? Now, the next important question is, how are we going to do in that tournament?
Yeah.
Are we going to able to break through? In Mexico, they have a phrase, the Quito Partido, the fifth game. Is the U.S. going to be able to get to the fifth game? And this is something,
right. Okay, right.
This is something that I've talked a lot about, which is, I've heard a lot that the U.S. has been able to reach the round of 16, and that should be the expectation. Like every American team should expect to reach the round of 16. If you really want to break through and impress, you got to reach the quarterfinals. And I think that people saying that don't really think about what they're actually saying and how ridiculously difficult that is. Like, what you're saying is you've been able to be, in order to reach the round of 16, you've been able to be one of the top 16 teams at the World Cup. That's not necessarily one of the top 16 teams in the world, just because of the way the World Cup works, where there's some regions that have a lot more talent than others and not necessarily able to make it. And we'll see what happens as the World Cup continues to expand and all that stuff. But just simple math. You have the round of 16. It's cut in half to the round of the quarterfinals, which is 8 teams. You got to be one of the 8 best teams in the world, or at least more or less, like theoretically, you had to be one of the 8 best teams in the world. And whenever you look at the rosters of the top, let's say the top 10 teams in the world, you see the roster makeups of these squads. It just gets so much more and more difficult to get to that level as you continue to move up the totem pole. I mean, the U.S. played the Netherlands this year. The U.S. had the best team on paper that they've ever had bringing to a World Cup. They go up against the Netherlands, and I would say the Netherlands is one of those teams that was a quarterfinal team, but not necessarily a semifinal team. I don't think they had semifinal talent, but they were kind of lower end quarterfinal team. And you look at them, and they've got De Jong, who is sitting like the highest paid player at Barcelona right now. Memphis Depay, who was this hotshot kid at Manchester United, and he gets moved back to Barcelona and is still just a primo attacker. You've got the best defender in the world, or at least he was at one time, sitting next to one of Manchester City's defenders. It's like it's not just a team full of Champions League level players. It's a team full of Champions League level players who are the best players on their Champions League teams.
Absolutely, yeah.
When you get to the quarterfinal, like this is what you have to have on your squad. And while the U.S. is in uncharted territories with the players that we have at these top teams, we don't have players like that. We don't have best in the world type players at any position right now. And then whenever you look down roster at the Netherlands, I mean, it's a bunch of Ajax and PSV players, which are very good in their own right. I mean, you have somebody like Daley Blind, who's got all this experience, and what's the I forget the guy's name, the winger who just terrorized us. I mean, just really, really, really good professional players that play at a very high level.
Yeah.
The difference between our roster and what that is great, man. And that's a lot of ground to cover. So what you're hoping in the next 3.5 years is that maybe Pulisic or Reyna or McKinney or maybe all of them, Adams, can get to that level where they are among the best players in the world at their positions. And then you have 12 other guys who are very, very, very good. Maybe not necessarily like Champions League level, but very, very good players throughout the lineup.
Yeah.
That's what you have to be if you want to be in round of 16, or you get lucky, maybe the thing bounces your way. But if you really I don't think any of us want what happened in 2002, which is like the U.S. kind of lucked their way into the quarterfinals. Like, we want to earn it, right? Like, we want to be good enough. That's what we want to do.
Yeah.
So in order to get there, you got to be so good. And even then, you got to hope that you don't draw Brazil or,
Exactly. Yeah. There's a lot of luck.
There's a lot of luck involved. So you got to hope everything goes your way. You got the talent, and then you get the draw that you need. And then nothing crazy happens in the game. And then to get to that next level, to get to that semifinal level or even that final level, France and Argentina played for the World Cup. I don't know that Argentina was necessarily on paper as strong as some of the other. I don't know if they were as strong as Brazil in the tournament necessarily. Or
not throughout the
France.
tournament, I think. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, on paper. I think Brazil on paper was the best team in the tournament, and they got unlucky, man. They got unlucky. That happens in the World Cup.
Right.
That's the reality. But in order to get to that level, let's take France, for instance. They got freaking Kylian Mbappe, right? They've got the best player in the world. If you want, you gotta have the best player in the world. Argentina had Lionel Messi. Brazil had Neymar. You gotta have one of those guys, and then the rest of your roster is just stud after stud after stud after stud after. The guys that they have are just ridiculous at that level. So I know a lot of American fans are like, here's where we've been. We're better now. We should have higher expectations. But the reality of what it takes to actually be at that level, it's difficult, man. And I just don't know if we're going to be able to get there on merit. Things can bounce your way. You can get raw,
Yeah, with a bit of luck, the talent that you're going to have in that squad, with a little bit of luck and the right man at the helm, the right tactician, someone who's playing to the strengths of the best players in that team, I think there's definitely a chance to get into those latter stages. Definitely.
Yeah, you look at Morocco. Morocco made a strong run. Their makeup of their squad is not so much different than ours, for sure.
No, man. The US definitely have some better players than Morocco too. I mean, that's just a natural fact. Yeah.
But they were able to get to penalties. I mean, they didn't score any goals, right?
They were very defensively playing, but they also had that when they needed to, they could go up and score as well. So
things happen, but in order to really get to that level, look at the US roster versus the England roster, it's just ridiculous. And then, these teams have these guys that aren't even on their teams that are just would be the best players ever for the US. Karim Benzema was not even in the French lineup. They were missing their left back. I forget his name. They were, they're missing they're missing Pogba. They're missing I want to say, what's the Chelsea midfielder's name? I forget his name.
Kante?
Yeah, they're missing Kante. Come on. Any one of those guys, and any one of those guys would be the greatest player that the U.S. ever developed in the history of our national team. And they don't even have them, and they're in the final. It's ridiculous, the gulf of talent. And that's what it takes to get to that level. I don't know if we're going to be able to get there in 3.5 years. I hope. I don't know.
I think you'll certainly be on leaps and bounds, and I think in no small part to the MLS and the youth systems that are propping up everywhere. I think they've got the best chance possible. If you were to set up something to say, look, we need to make this team a lot better, what can we set up? A very high quality 30-team league with everybody with youth development and lots of money going into it. That's a very fine place to start, I think.
Oh, absolutely. And we're seeing it bear fruit, man. I mean, we just, like I've said before, in most leagues in Europe, you don't see half the league producing talent. Like you see a couple of teams producing talent. You see generally the players go up to those top teams, and if they make it, they stay. If they don't, they'll either get loaned out or they'll get sold. Sometimes they get recycled around, like a Mohamed Salah or a Kevin De Bruyne situation where they made it to the pinnacle, they weren't good enough, they got shot out, and then they made it back to the top. But other times you're like Thomas Mueller, and you start at the top and you just never leave the top. And there's a lot of guys like that. Like Messi was like that. Vinicius Jr. was like that. You just start at the top and you stay at the top, man. It doesn't. You don't have a lot of teams that are churning out players like you see in MLS, man. It's crazy that just a team like Sporting Kansas City, which is a team that is just kind of there in MLS. They're kind of an afterthought. Has Gianluca Busio, who's a super exciting player that gets sent off to the Italian Serie A. It's an interesting league. It's really just weird how it all plays out, and it's super exciting in that way.
Yeah, because why not them? They've got just as good a chance of it being them than anybody else, which is, like I say, not something you can say for everywhere. So we're in 2026, when US bring home the trophy, I'm going to borrow a question from Twitter that I saw today. Where's the parade going to be?
I mean, that's a really good question, man. Soccer House is in Chicago, or at least it was. I think they moved the offices, but Chicago seems like a worthwhile destination. I wonder where the final is going to be. Is it going to be in Dallas? Is it going to be?
That's a good question. Yeah, we're not going to see the Rose Bowl again, I guess.
I don't know. It may be in New York. New York seems like a worthy destination. A lot of those guys are from that area anyway. Super stadium,
isn't it? It's going to need a huge one.
The cool thing is, I'm sure in all the hometowns you're going to have celebrations as well.
Big time.
Yeah. So you'll get to have that homecoming. And the great thing about that is you get these players get the respect that they deserve. I think because the top end American soccer athletes are not always given the spotlight as top athletes in this country, but they deserve. I think some stars were made following the World Cup. I'm seeing Weston McKennie in ads all over the place now, which is really cool. And of course, Christian's been a star for a while, but I think more of these guys are getting more and more well known, which is cool. So whenever the U.S. wins the 2026 World Cup, you'll have 26 superstars across the country and 26 heroes that everybody will look up to, and you'll have multiple parades all over the place. Maybe even places where they don't even have players that are from those areas. Like
absolutely,
like all the MLS clubs are gonna have celebrations and stuff. Not the ones in Canada, but the ones in the US.
Well, they were a surprise package. They were very good against Belgium, I have to say. I mean, very impressive from their point of view as well. So when I talk to the Toronto or the Vancouver guys, and or Montreal, which I think is going to be coming up soon as well, I'll be definitely there to talk about similar stuff with them as well.
They looked really good, man, and I think a lot of it had to do with us just underrating a lot of their players. I mean, a lot of their guys, they're just good players, man. I mean, I talk so much smack on Alistair Johnson whenever the U.S. played Canada and Christian Pulisic was struggling to get by Alistair Johnson. But I'll be damned if I didn't see that dude in the World Cup just ball out on both sides of the ball. He's a really good player, man. And Canada has a bunch of those guys that you just didn't really expect to be as good as they were. But and of course, I mean the heroic effort that they got from like Alphonso Davies throughout World Cup qualifying.
Oh man, he's fantastic.
Just a really good team, and I think that's you see the rising tide of MLS just raising all ships, man. And you see that throughout CONCACAF, but I think Canada in particular, just coming from the abyss of international soccer, just being an afterthought, to all of a sudden being a really exciting team in the World Cup and producing these truly incredible players. And we'll see what continues on. I mean, they're one of these nations that, just like the U.S., have a lot of dual internationals, and for a long time, these guys just chose not to play with Canada. It wasn't worth it to them. So if they can, if they're open to it, I know some countries and some cultures are less receptive to having dual internationals than others. Like the U.S. is super receptive to it, whereas others aren't quite as receptive. But if Canada is the same way, and they can convince a few more of these guys to play for the Maple Leafs, I mean, I don't see any reason why they can't continue this on. It seems like the arrival of a new power in CONCACAF.
Absolutely. I think they will go from strength to strength, just as the US team have as well. Sam, it's been absolutely amazing having you on. Your depth of insight is absolutely fascinating. I could talk to you all day, honestly. That's really, really good. And if anybody hasn't seen your videos, I recommend you check out Yank Report. Obviously, you probably have. If you're looking at this channel already, you probably know Yank Report already. But where can people find you online, Sam?
Yank Report on YouTube for sure. Have the Twitter account at Report Yank. Shoot, I got a TikTok now. I don't post on TikTok very much, but I do every now and then. I was posting during the World Cup, but just trying to get out there in as many places as possible. But I appreciate you having me on, man. I haven't made videos in the last few weeks because I've just been super busy with work. So I just unloaded all of my thoughts.
Absolutely loved it. I loved it. Your knowledge is so deep, and you've got such a strategic brain to think around these topics. I absolutely love talking to you about it. So thank you so much for spending the time with me.
Absolutely, man. Really enjoyed it.
Good stuff. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, Tom.
Cheers.